Hey, I'm some nobody, and I want you to remember that because the things I'm gonna say in this video may make some people unreasonably upset. Some people may be unreasonably upset from the title alone. But I went to go see two movies. I had high hopes for both of them, and I was a fan of both of their characters. I saw both Superman and Fantastic Four First Steps opening weekend, and ever since, these thoughts have been dancing around in my head, so I figure I might as well make a video out of them. Expect spoilers for both movies, but don't expect a coherent thought. I'm just gonna be rambling. I'm gonna start the rambling with a little story. I went to go see both of these movies with two entirely different friend groups. There was only one guy that I saw both movies with. He asked me not to use his real name when I tell this story, so we're just gonna say it was my buddy Eric. Eric's not a Superman fan. He had a very typical perspective of he's boring, he's overpowered, you know, such and such. But the movie made him a believer. He walked out of the theater saying, "I love Superman now." But Eric was already a huge fan of the Fantastic Four, so immediately after he said he loved Superman, he said, "Oh fuck, what if it's better than Fantastic Four?" Fast forward 2 weeks, and just under 2 hours later, we're sitting there through the credits of Fantastic Four, and I lean over to him and I say, "Is it too soon for me to say it?" He responds with, "I feel like I already know what you're about to say." And then here's the next 4 lines of dialogue between me and Eric. "Superman was better. Yeah. By a lot. Yeah." And then the discussion that followed the movie was anybody in the group that had seen Superman just talking about how good Superman was. And then anytime after that, if me and my friends tried to talk about Fantastic Four, we inevitably just wound up talking about how good Superman was. It's really not that Fantastic Four was bad, it was good, I enjoyed it. Aesthetically, I absolutely love the Fantastic Four, that retro-futurist style of like a futuristic 1960s New York. There were a lot of really cool visuals too, like everything involving the Silver Surfer was fucking awesome, from her arrival on Earth, to Johnny chasing her to orbit, to her chasing the Fantastic Four away from Galactus. I'd say everything between the Silver Surfer's arrival on Earth and the end of Sue's speech in front of the Baxter Building is the best stretch of the movie. Performance-wise, I think every actor in the movie absolutely killed it. I'd say Joseph Quinn and Vanessa Kirby were the standouts as the Storm siblings because they get some of the best material in the movie. I think there's only like one standout scene in the movie that doesn't involve one of those two. And I mean that both dramatically and from an action perspective, because Johnny and Sue do all the coolest shit in the movie. But even still, Pedro Pascal as Reed and Eben Moss-Backrack as Ben are nothing to sneeze at. A lot of people really weren't happy about Pedro Pascal being cast as Reed Richards, whether that just be that they're sick of seeing him and everything, or that they're racist. I have to admit, I myself wasn't a fan of the casting at first. I was worried they were casting based on name recognition rather than whether or not Pascal could play a convincing Reed Richards. But Pascal is popular for a reason. He's a good fucking actor, and the second he opened his mouth, I was like, damn, that's Reed Richards. He gave a very nuanced performance as a character that is logical to a fault. Eben Moss-Backrack has the hardest job in the cast, the hardest name to pronounce, and the hardest skin of the 4. He plays the Thing, which means in live action, your performance is inherently going to be hampered by the fact that you're either buried in prosthetics or you're covered up by a computer. And part of the Thing's thing is that despite his appearance, he is the most human member of the team. Despite his tough exterior, he's got the squishiest, softest insides. If you're playing Ben Grimm, you have to face the same challenges that he faces. Using pretty much just your voice to come off as vulnerable and warm and being the heart and soul of the team while looking like a monster. And in that regard, I think Eben did a very good job, especially considering the Thing doesn't get that much to do in the movie. I really enjoyed most of what he got to do though. If I'm being honest with you, I gotta deduct some points from his performance because his "it's clobbering time" was absolutely terrible. He desperately needs to work on that if they're ever going to have him say it in the MCU again, and also they need to get rid of that beard. The Thing's beard looked neat for one scene, but the longer he had it, the worse it made his design. But yeah, all 4 of the Fantastic Four's actors had great chemistry, gave great performances, all around they were fantastic.
Say that again?
Julia Garner and Ralph Ineson don't get much screen time as Shalla-Bal and Galactus respectively, but what they do get, they make the most out of. The scene between Johnny and Shalla-Bal where he confronts her with her past after deciphering her language is probably my favorite scene in the 3rd act. And anytime Galactus speaks in the movie is an absolute highlight. All in all, both the villains are fantastic.
Say that again?
There was so much about this movie that I really enjoyed. It really shouldn't be scientifically possible for me to love so much of a movie and still think it was just okay. It's amazing by MCU standards, but that's kind of the problem, is that it's an MCU project. Meaning it's kind of bland and a bit uninspired. It feels like pretty much every other Marvel movie, which really hindered this movie, which has more of a focus on family and drama and the connections between the characters rather than action. The Silver Surfer and Galactus are more of a looming threat than an ever-present one. Listen man, me personally, I'm fine with it being more drama than action. The director's fine with it being more drama than action, but isn't there somebody you forgot to ask? This movie really felt like they wrapped shooting, all the cast and crew were like, good job team, let's go home and rest, and then after all the real filmmakers left for the day, Kevin Feige snuck in and decided the movie needed to be optimized. People were clowning on James Gunn on Twitter for saying the biggest risk he took with Superman was including a 12-minute talking scene. It's a statement that's easy to clown on. You took a risk by including a scene where characters exchange dialogue in a movie. But you have to remember that for the last 17 years, Marvel has pretty much completely dictated how the public perceives superhero and comic book movies. So it's that mindset behind Marvel that made that 12-minute dialogue scene in Superman a risk and kind of ruined Fantastic Four First Steps for me. There are a lot of montages in Fantastic Four. Too many, as a matter of fact, and interlaced in all these montages are these scenes where the actors are giving terrific dramatic performances. But these performances don't get to breathe, and we don't get back-to-back dramatic scenes because Feige is afraid the audience will get bored if something isn't constantly moving. So this movie that's meant to carry itself on its drama rather than its action has its pathos completely kneecapped. So by the time Galactus actually shows up on Earth, it falls flat because the movie just kind of skipped over a bunch of scenes that were gonna build up the looming dread of the potential end of the Earth. And the finale of the movie doesn't have the tension or the emotions running high enough to make up for the fact that it's pretty mediocre in the action department. Most of the Fantastic Four can't do anything to Galactus. He shrugs off any attempt they make. And I feel like that would have been really effective if the movie was actually allowed to build up the dread of a planet-ending threat instead of having to constantly move in fear of the kids watching full-volume TikToks in the theater. Instead, the finale is just kinda lackluster because Reed does nothing with his stretchy powers except use them to climb stuff. They're trying to stop Galactus from walking somewhere, so Reed could have turned himself into a tripwire or wrapped himself around Galactus's feet like he tied his shoelaces together. Johnny in the finale temporarily blinds Galactus once and then spends the rest of the finale just moving things around. The Thing delivers the worst "it's clobbering time" I've ever heard and then does 0 damage. You can't say it's clobbering time and then do 0 damage. I ain't hear no us against the world, I ain't hear no I am ready to put on a show, I ain't hear no disappear. How'd you say it's clobbering time and then do nothing with it? Ultimately, the finale comes down to Sue pretty much soloing Galactus, which I would have been fine with if they properly built up that hopelessness. I should have felt more seeing Sue Storm give everything she's got to save her baby and her planet, but instead I was just sitting there like I was watching a Stranger Things season finale. And then the movie does 2 fake outs that I didn't buy into for a second because it would actually take some balls to go through with either of them. I would have respected the hell out of this movie if they actually let Johnny sacrifice himself. Overall, I'd say Fantastic Four was good, but had the potential to be great, and that might be worse than it just being bad. Fantastic Four is about 20 minutes shorter than Superman, and I've heard tell that about 30 minutes of footage were cut from it, and in my opinion, the movie desperately needed that if it wanted to compete with Superman. Until I see a director's cut, I'll say the movie's pretty good, but it's definitely not fantastic.
Look at this.
Let me tell you how long it took for me to lean over to my friends in the theater and say, this is a good movie while watching Superman. It took about 1 minute. I decided I liked the movie after the opening crawl, the 3 centuries ago, 3 decades ago, 3 weeks ago, 3 days ago, 3 minutes ago. It was bold, it was stylish, it got straight to the point, and it established everything we need to know about this DC universe within a minute. And then we see our hero, our Superman, beat to shit, barely clinging on to life, but the second he is able to move again, before he's even 100%, he's already going right back to the fight. And yeah, he gets his ass beat again, but it's in that moment that we see the true impact he's had. A normal guy with no superpowers whatsoever doesn't hesitate to jump in and help Superman up. An average citizen sees somebody in need and steps up to the plate. That's what Superman's all about, inspiring people to do good where they can. There are several conflicts in the movie, internal and external, that revolve around that idea, like with the Baravia-Jarhanpur conflict, an all too realistic military conflict where Superman simply steps in to save lives and it gets him in hot water because he's technically interfering with the geopolitical climate. There are more consequences for Superman saving innocent people than there are for one of America's allies killing innocent people. That's the basis for the scene where Lois interviews Superman. A lot of people see that scene as one of them is right and one of them is wrong, but the truth is they're both kinda right. Lois is right because every choice you make, even the choice to do good, comes with consequences. And Clark is right because he gets upset that unfortunately, doing the right thing is almost always the hardest choice between doing nothing and doing the wrong thing. Superman is pretty much the only character that doesn't struggle with that decision in such a simple way, more on that later. Krypto is a bad dog, and he's not even Clark's dog, but Clark still turns himself in to try and save Krypto because, in his own words, Krypto is alone and scared. Superman figuratively, but somewhat literally, willingly walks into hell just to save an innocent creature. Several other characters struggle with the decision between doing what's right and doing what's easy though. When the Justice Gang first show up, they choose to kill the kaiju instead of trying to restrain it peacefully. Then later on, both Hawkgirl and Green Lantern refuse to help Lois save Superman because it would be a great inconvenience, getting involved with politics and all that. Mr. Terrific makes the choice to do the right thing and he becomes the coolest fucking guy in the movie. Green Lantern and Hawkgirl eventually decide to do good despite the difficulties that will come with it though. But in my opinion, no character has to struggle with the decision more than Metamorpho. He's the character with the absolute most to lose by making the decision to do the right thing. But he still ultimately decides to do the right thing and trust Superman. That recurring theme of making the choice to do good is arguably the essence of Superman, and I thought the way James Gunn conveyed it was absolutely fantastic. Now, I want to take a little bit to talk about what I personally think is the absolute best scene in the movie, a scene so good I'd say it might be one of the best scenes in superhero movie history. Like, I'm putting it up there with the Spider-Man 2 train scene. The scene with Molly in the pocket dimension, an absolutely heartbreaking scene, but one that perfectly captures the dichotomy between Lex Luthor and Superman. It's shot in such a chaotic way with the camera moving all around and so many people yelling at the same time. The specific part of it where it follows the gun as Lex moves it around is absolutely crazy. And you expect the scene to go on a little bit, drag out the tension, Molly maybe gets saved last second by somebody coming to get Lex or something, but no, then it just fucking happens. I don't know about you guys, but I could literally hear the air get sucked out of my theater when the shot went off. It's a really bold and powerful scene, having a civilian's last words be "I believe in you" before they're executed right in front of the hero. My favorite thing about it is that it perfectly captures the inherent hypocrisy of Lex's worldview, because after killing an innocent man in cold blood for the crime of just being kind, Lex's immediate reaction is to question the statistics of it. Meanwhile, the alien freak who's here to lord his superiority over all of mankind, in Lex's eyes, sheds tears over a man he barely knew. Lex claims that his hatred of Superman is for humanity's sake, that because Superman is an alien, he cannot be trusted to be our protector unchecked. Yet Lex does not value human life in the slightest. It's one thing to fund a war where people are being killed and not feel anything, but to kill a man yourself and feel nothing? It's just a really great scene. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm going to talk about the most controversial part of the new Superman movie, his birth parents. This is probably the ballsiest move that Gunn pulled with his version of Superman, and while I can understand why some people may not like the idea of Jor-El and Lara sending Superman to Earth because he'd be able to conquer it, I think it worked. I've personally never been a fan of Kal-El's parents sending him to Earth for the specific purpose of protecting it. It kinda diminishes the impact of Clark choosing to protect Earth. In my opinion, the origin story is at its best when they send him to Earth simply for survival rather than some grander purpose. But narratively, I think the decision to have Jor-El and Lara want Kal-El to turn Earth into a new Krypton was actually pretty interesting. Primarily for the effect that the original misunderstood message and the fully revealed true message have on Clark. The misunderstood message is why Clark is Superman. He believes it's his purpose to protect the people of Earth. The reason Superman never struggles with the conflict of doing good at your own detriment is because he believes it's his purpose to do good no matter what. Every other character I mentioned had to actually make that choice at some point in the story, but for Clark there never was a choice. That choice was made for him before he was even sentient. So this version of Clark never had to grapple with those inner conflicts like, why am I here? Why am I so different from everybody else? Why do I have these abilities? He doesn't have to find those answers for himself. He got all the answers from the final wishes of his real parents. And that's where Lex kinda has a point, has like half a point about Superman being an alien. Because for most of his life, Superman didn't have the key factor to the human experience, and that's the fact that no one will ever tell you why the fuck you're here. You will spend your entire life looking for purpose, and no one is ever going to give it to you. You will spend your entire life trying to make the right choices, and nobody will ever tell you whether you are or not. When the truth comes out, Superman doesn't struggle with his birth parents being evil or the public turning on him. He struggles with the exact same struggles that every single human being has to face every single day. He doesn't have a built-in purpose for existing. He doesn't know why he's here anymore. Suddenly, every single choice he makes is his own and not him adhering to somebody else's wishes. It's easy to be good when it's the only thing you were ever meant to be, but now, just like every other human character in the story, Clark has to choose to be good. And David Cornsweet acts this uniquely human dilemma out perfectly in the scene with Lois with the Justice Gang fighting the Imp in the background, and the scene with Jonathan Kent on the Kent farm. That's the deeper meaning behind him replacing the footage of his alien parents in the fortress with the footage of his human parents. Because Clark finally has the one thing that separated him from the rest of humanity, the uniquely human trait to choose who you want to be. And I'm pretty excited for Supergirl because I feel like we're going to see her go through that same dilemma of struggling to choose who she wants to be and finding her own purpose in life. So yeah, what Gunn did with the House of L was a risky move, and I definitely understand why people are upset about it, but I think it paid off. I think what that change did for the narrative was absolutely fantastic. Now, I said all that extra stuff about Superman because number one, I fucking loved Superman, and number two, I was trying to make a point that Superman actually outdid Fantastic Four in the drama department. I felt pretty much every emotion you could feel watching Superman, and Fantastic Four didn't really do much for me. There were two scenes in Superman that actually made my eyes water a fair amount, namely the boy with the flag and the one shot of Superman rising out of the dust after saving that lady evacuating. And while I do think the movie could have afforded to lose a joke here and there, the humor never really impacted the more serious moments. So yeah, I would say Superman out-dramaed the movie that was meant to carry itself on its drama, but I don't need to tell you that Superman out-actioned them too. Pretty much every action set piece in Superman is visually stunning and an absolute spectacle for the eyes. The Mr. Terrific fight scene was so cool, I was sitting there in the theater wishing that he was in a video game so I could main him. But then you also had the absolutely magnificent escape from the pocket dimension and the entire finale. Superman versus the Engineer and Ultraman, fucking awesome. Superman 1v1ing Ultraman, fucking awesome. Superman versus the Raptors, fucking awesome. Walking out of the theater after Superman, I was looking like Drake and Josh after they rode the Demonator. Me and my friends were still in the theater sitting through the credits of Fantastic Four, talking about how good Superman was. If you saw both and you thought Fantastic Four was better, that's totally fine. I'm not going to go after you for your opinion, but if you ask me, Superman packed and smoked the Fantastic Four.